The UK government is being lobbied to introduce a per-mile tax on electric vehicles. I think this is the right thing to do, but it does raise some important questions. The Campaign for Better Transport has written to the Chancellor highlighting an urgent issue with revenue raised from fuel duty. 38% of the price of petrol at the pump is collected by the government as fuel duty. Internal combustion engine cars also pay vehicle excise duties, road tax. Electric vehicles do not pay either fuel duty or road tax. Road tax will be necessary for electric vehicles from April 2025. This was put in place by the previous government. The letter points out that government revenue from fuel duty is going to decline as the number of electric vehicles increases. And it estimates that in the medium term, this means that the government will lose £5 billion per year. So it proposes a charge levied on electric vehicles on a per mile basis, recorded by odometer readings. I think it's interesting to pause for a minute and question why the government actually raises tax for drivers. The government taxes drivers to the tune of £35 billion per year, of which £7 billion is road tax and £28 billion fuel duty. The £7 billion in road tax all goes to the National Roads Fund, so it's specifically used to maintain and improve roads. However, the fuel duty revenue does not have to be spent on anything particular, so it just goes into the general government tax pot. 53 pence of the current price of £1.41 per litre is collected by the government as fuel duty. Taking into account VAT, 54% of the price of petrol is taken in tax. A recent Select Committee report in 2022 calculated that the revenue raised by fuel duty is equivalent to approximately 5 pence on the rate of income tax, so it is a significant source of government revenue. What is the purpose of this? When fuel duty was first introduced in 1909, it was purely a tax-raising measure. However, it now has an additional potential role of changing the incentives in relation to driving versus public transport. My view is that fuel duty should not be used for general revenue raising. As a general tax measure, like VAT, it's a regressive tax. Poor people end up paying a much higher percentage of their income in fuel duty than the rich. I've talked before about the idea of hypothecation. The definition of hypothecation is the allocation of a particular tax for a specific expenditure purpose. So the road tax is an example of a hypothecated tax. I believe there's a strong argument that fuel duty should only be raised in relation to vehicles and roads and transport perhaps more generally. I do think that taxing drivers is really important. Petrol cars are really bad for the environment and for public health through the pollution that they cause. Therefore, I've got no problem in the government taking this into account, increasing the disincentive to use cars through increasing the cost of fuel. However, again, this shouldn't just be about revenue raising. It should be about creating an incentive to walk, to cycle, or to take public transport. It should also be about reducing congestion. If driving becomes cheaper with electric vehicles because there's less tax collected by the government from drivers, congestion will definitely increase. Therefore, it does seem sensible to introduce tax on electric vehicle usage to replace the fuel duty. But I emphasise that it shouldn't be tax raising for general purposes. Let's increase general tax rates rather than doing it through the back door of taxing others more. Obviously, taxing electric vehicles can't be done at the pump, so the principle of paying per mile seems like the right approach. Like the fuel duty, the more you drive, the more you pay, which is fair. Someone who just uses their car to travel to work and back will pay a lot less tax than someone who's driving in their car all day. The Campaign for Transport is proposing a simple per mile charge that would apply to all electric vehicles. However, there are possible options that may be a little bit fairer. For example, the per mile charge could be lower where there's no public transport options. Obviously, it's better for the system not to be too complex, But if the technology will allow this, it could be desirable for variations of this sort to be included. This is about creating the right incentives in terms of car use versus public transport, but not unnecessarily taxing people when there's no alternatives. It is important that the government moves quickly on this. As more and more people buy electric vehicles, they're going to become used to the cheapness of running them, of paying no or low tax compared to petrol vehicles. I think that electric vehicle drivers should be paying more tax, but I think that all this tax should go to improving roads and particularly to improving public transport so that the latter becomes a more feasible alternative. And it's fair enough that it's set at a level to get the incentive right on the car versus public transport choice. However, I don't think that drivers should be paying any more than this into the general tax pot. Be upfront and put general spending in the general tax rate. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.